Hello, hello. Welcome to the Design Thinking at Work podcast. My name is Lacy Hazelbaker. Over the past 4 months, my classmates and I have been dissecting the term literacy and considering how we can, and should, adopt a definition that extends beyond the scope of traditional reading and writing. Meaning can be made in a countless number of ways. The goal of this podcast is to apply the New London Group's concept of design across a number of disciplines and examine the implications of our observations for school literacy learning. For my chapter of this project, I had the wonderful opportunity to interview Audrey Nicolas. She is an associate professor of fashion design at Columbus College of Art and Design, and if you look her up on their website, you will learn that she has over 18 years of experience across the globe, from France to Hong Kong, Nepal to Peru. Audrey got her BA in fashion design from a small school in Paris and spent the first 16 years of her career working for big brands in Europe and the United States.
Career have been a little bit split into two. I spent the first 16 years of my career as a fashion designer specialized in knitwear, working for big brand in Europe and in the United States. And then I became a full-time professor here at CCAD in a college teaching fashion design since 6 years. And I would say becoming a professor was kind of a natural way of continuing how to impact a little bit the young generation with what I've learned all these 16 years. I think it came naturally to me in the need of transmitting that information and that knowledge. And it has been a great journey so far.
Our conversation may have been brief, but the insights Audrey provided about the fashion design process make me confident that she is a stellar professor. Within literacy studies, design is all about transforming available resources of meaning into something new. Traditionally, we think of words and sentences as the building blocks of literacy, but within the world of fashion design, meaning makers use various fabrics and techniques to convey emotions and ideas through their craft. Audrey's specialty is knitwear, and she was able to share with me how she uses yarn as a resource.
Even if I was designing for a big brand, we always felt very creative because from the start, we had to really create the stitches, combining yarns, and sometimes we had surprises. So we had to kind of figure out things that worked, things that didn't work. And I really continue all over the years to build that knowledge. Today, I actually love knitting by hand and continue to crochet. So there is a lot that we can translate into the type of yarn that we're going to choose, a combination, because we can mix different yarns together, how we can, give a message through texture, through assembling different techniques. The fact that I traveled a lot to Hong Kong also made me meet different cultures and learning a lot from the best technicians, and so I think that without really knowing it, when I create some things for myself, this is where I can be a little bit more meaningful in my work right now. I always want to weave into it a side of the cultures that I met. Sometimes I use objects that I brought back from traveling. I still have some natural dyes that I brought back from Nepal. And so in my particular work, I'm more interested in others' cultures and my travel histories and my own French culture, which is kind of weird. But there is a lot of different ways I'm trying to give a narrative through a simple sweater that I need, or a simple snood, or a little dress for a fashion show. I never create something where there is not a little personal story behind it.
I don't know if you could give me a little bit more. I'm trying to wrap my head around how different gauges of yarn in the knitwear, how can the different thickness and stuff, how can that impact the messaging or how it appears or what the sweater says? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so when I work, for example, in freelancing, I do two collections a year for one of my clients, and their clients are from Europe as well as from Asia. And so through the type of yarn that I choose, the type of trend that I look, I'm going to want to create a collection that suits an older customer versus maybe a younger Asian customer. And so when I look at the trends, the new designer are really the ones that are kind of setting a little bit where the direction, the conceptual direction is going. And when you look into high-end fashion shows, there is a lot of messages behind the garments, whether it's on societal issues, whether it's on political or environmental issues. And so it's not necessarily obvious in my design that I'm going to give that message, but sometimes I'm going to create a graphic, a little jacquard. Sometimes I'm going to want to create maybe a word, a messaging, whether it's a positive messaging through colors, through writing, through a motif. And so I always try to inject somehow a little bit of whimsical, a little bit of joy, a little bit of always being really positive.
I was beginning to understand the connection between fashion design and literacy, but at this point in the conversation, I still felt a little uncertain about how much meaning could be made through yarn. But Audrey's next anecdote really began to clarify things for me.
Yeah, right. I'm a single mom. I live with my son, so the TV things the show that I watch are soccer and like kids things. So I needed to kind of escape a little bit. So I started to hand knit, and I started to hand it for myself. And I realized that in a lot of ways, the yarn that I was choosing were kind of representing grounding. And in a way, I was trying to create through very chunky yarn mixed with a very fuzzy green, that sort of merge of the stiff, the hard versus the whimsical, the soft, and the dreamy. So sometimes without realizing, what we're putting together is what we need in our life. And I think that within this little creation I do for myself, I take off the worry of I'm designing for a client, it needs to be this, it needs to be that. And in a way, what I'm creating become way more of a narrative for myself. And during years, I did not allow myself to work without a purpose, or that project needs to be a freelancing project, so it give me money, and I really allow myself to lose time, because knitting takes hours for making a sweater, but to really use that time to heal or to meditate. Or so behind a simple garment, there is also a very meditative practice that talk from a mental health perspective.
As Audrey spoke about this project she took on during COVID, I found myself relating as a fellow creative, and this made the ties between fashion design and written literacy much clearer in my mind. When I design a poem or a short story, I think about a lot of those same words that she used: fuzzy, whimsical, dreamy. The feelings and colors and textures that I try to convey through words as a place of comfort, she creates physically with yarn. In both instances, we are transforming the materials and resources we have at our disposal to design something new, something that serves some purpose for us. After this revelation, I asked Audrey about the affordances and limitations of meaning-making resources in fashion design.
Creative people, we tend to be resourceful, right? So if we don't necessarily have the resource, we are often going to use our network, use the community, or really use the resources that we can find to create.
Unlike an author's access to words, a fashion designer must source physical materials for their projects. With access to fabric stores being a limiting factor, for example, all of the Joann stores closed recently, fashion designers have to look elsewhere for their products.
So there is limitation for sure, but I would say that I can see, because of this limitation of or cost or affordability, people are thinking more critically and are being way more resourceful, and the work that comes out in general is even more interesting.
Audrey also noted that a lot of young designers value sustainability versus fast fashion. She views this as a positive thing that drives innovation rather than a limiting factor, like you might suspect. One aspect of our conversation surrounding meaning making that I found insightful was when Audrey described the pressures of shifting from the corporate world to the academic setting.
From corporate versus coming from an academic background, sometimes I feel very pressured to create very conceptual creations or designs. And it was a learning curve for me to get there because I used to design functional and commercial work, which is not as valued. So I would say I'm trying to push myself to get more into the conceptual, and that has been a learning curve. So it's more about rethinking and what is really my voice. So it has been more of a coming back to the roots and being the students and learning how to be creative in this way again.
I would argue that the issue of commercialized design is not unique to the fashion industry. Even in the realm of traditional literacy, we often ask students to reproduce ideas and structures. How much meaning is there, truly, in a cookie-cutter response to an AP Literature exam? A mass-produced article of clothing doesn't seem too different from a short answer response to me. I would argue that most design that takes place is functional across fields, whether it's literacy or not, and I think everyone could benefit from a little bit more intentionality. But I digress. The parallels between the fashion world and literacy continued as Audrey explained her design process.
So I love to do mind map. So mind map is, you have an idea, but you don't know where to start or how far I could expand it. And so I don't know if you know the concept of mind mapping. Yeah. So I love to do mind map. We do a lot of sketchbooking in fashion, whether it's cutting a lot of images, putting them together, but the mind mapping really helped into expanding an idea that can be anything to bring it back to texture, materials, fashion silhouettes, fashion details. And so that helped me sometime really push myself. Trying to think about a design, not necessarily in, I'm going to do a pen with two legs, but starting to think about it as what are the details I could invent or I could modify so that I get my idea across. And that concept that I have is translated into maybe a specific buttons, maybe the shape of the pocket. So it's a lot of wording. And then after that, it's a lot of sketching, right? So I do a lot of little doodles. I put colors. I think color influenced me a lot. And I always bring objects that I have around me. And my house is a lot of stuff because I think I cherish some of these objects that I have. I love to combine non-fashion elements to it to really inspire silhouette, to really inspire detail. And after that, I look into what are my resources? Would that fabric work? Can I dye it? Can I paint on it? I bought one time a very shiny green pleated fabric, and I started to paint black acrylic on it that started to look like a leather. And I was like, wow, I'm loving that. And I'm going to do some embroidery on top. It costed me hours, but the result was really, really cool. And so it's a lot of hands-on trials, a lot of little mock-up, and then creating the final piece.
I think that Audrey's description of mind mapping and trial and error reveals not only her creative process, but also provided more tangible examples of resources fashion designers use to make meaning. It was notable to me that she uses words and sketches in her brainstorming sessions. As she described it, a single article of clothing is the result of layers of multimodal meaning making. Not all of it is vibes-based, though. Audrey also explained some of the technical stuff that happens behind the scenes.
I was able to exhibit some of my process work a few years ago, thinking about the architecture of fashion design. And when we think about architecture of fashion design, is all about the construction of the garment, which is not something that we really exhibit, right? Nobody is interested in looking at a technical design with some call outs and what is the construction of this. But a lot of the knowledge that I built, which talk about the reading and the writing, is around the technical aspect of my work, knowing how to translate an idea so anybody in any factory or any seamstress could understand your work. So that side for designer become a little bit more of a technical.
Literacy is not about skills, at least not unless you are working from an autonomous model, but I think that it was worth mentioning the use of design manuals in a corporate fashion setting. At this point in the interview, we shifted our attention to the classroom. Earlier, I made a comment about Audrey being a stellar professor. Listen to this clip to hear why.
In the classroom where I teach, we instilled a lot of collaborative projects. In my case, I come from a very small school. I learn way less than what we teach to my students today, but I have been doing a lot of projects with organizations, some that are not, of course, a lot of them non-profit organization, but some of them, and one that we just did is with a Tribe for Jazz, learning about music as a method of healing and meditation, and how music really influence our mindset. And my students were able to experience fusing art, illustration, fashion, and music all in one project. And what I'm saying here is trying to bring them out of their comfort zone. And so a lot of the assignment I'm trying to do is first finding your why, and really stand behind your choices of design. Why do you choose to do this, and how it's going to impact or influence? And the second part is bringing them out of the comfort zone so they come out of that assignment a little bit transformed, right? Even if it's just a little bit.
Wow, there is so much to take away from that. Starting from the top, the jazz project that she described sounds incredible and like something Dr. Connors may have to steal for a future iteration of this course. Fusing different modes and mediums, fashion, illustration, and music, creates a unique experience for students to explore the relationships between these design elements. We may not organically think about the sound of a dress, for example, but when we are asked to build bridges of meaning, our understandings of both elements are enhanced. I also really resonate with her focus on bringing students out of their comfort zone. I think that this is something that rarely happens in the traditional classroom. More often than not, students know what is expected of them, and that is the extent of what they will do. If they are never asked to take risks or try something new, though, their growth is limited to the edges of the rubric. I agree with Audrey that pushing students to consider their why is one of the most important things for educators to do.
So I'm not going to tell them what to do. I'm going to ask question that provoke some thoughts. Ooh, I didn't thought about that. Or, let me think about it. And so there is a lot of guidance, but there is a lot of questioning to really push them to have that critical thinking. I think that a lot of times they don't force themselves in thinking, ooh, what is the story I want to tell behind my design? So in every assignment, they have to write about the why.
I believe that literacy educators should think about their assignments in a similar way to what Audrey is describing here. When we ask a student to produce anything, whether it is a written or multimodal piece, a poem, or a piece of pottery, our focus should be on the why. Literacy is ideological. It's socially situated. It's something that students will understand best if they understand the context that it's taking place in. It's not autonomous. It is not a set of skills that can be checked off of a list. As an educator, my primary focus is and always has been on empowerment. The definition of literacy and what counts as an English assignment is something that will continue to be debated and discussed among scholars. On the ground, in the classrooms, what's important is that we teach our students to interpret and influence the world around them in meaningful ways. What works will likely look different in every classroom, which is okay. It's expected. Every classroom is filled with different students who have different goals and different whys. It is our responsibility as literacy educators, as teachers, to clue them in on the systems of power that exist around them and equip them with the language and skills and tools that they need to make the difference that they want to see in the world. At the end of our interview, I asked Audrey if there was anything else she would like to mention before signing off. Here is what she had to say.
I think that we are all in the need of some fresh avenues. We will all go to Target, buy our clothes. I'm doing it myself, unfortunately, a lot of the time. But hopefully, within the design process, what we are trying to tell here is a little bit more becoming an artist with a mission, right? So even if it's in a very small, meaningful way, the fashion industry today really need this sort of a fresh avenues and fresh minds of young designers to bring some more meaning into it. And there is just so many positive message we can give and impact in many ways. So hopefully that industry becomes a little better and in a more purposeful way and meaningful way.
To round out this podcast episode, I want to echo Audrey's desire for young designers to bring more meaning into the work they do. Whether it is designing a dress, creating a YouTube video, writing a poem, or posting something on TikTok, our creation says something about who we are and what we believe. In a world that is battling ethical dilemmas of artificial intelligence and online echo chambers, there is beauty and hope in authentic human design. Thank you for listening.